Most people believe they understand themselves. They think their choices are rational, their feelings are clear, their behavior is under control. They believe they know why they want what they want, why they fear what they fear, why they repeat what they repeat. But Sigmund Freud believed something much darker. He believed that most human behavior is not driven by logic at all. It is driven by forces beneath the surface, hidden desires, buried memories, repressed emotions, unconscious conflict. In other words, Freud believed that a large part of your life is shaped by motives you do not even recognize, and that is disturbing, because if you do not know what is driving you, then you are not really in control. You are being moved from below, pulled by something invisible, influenced by impulses you never chose consciously. That is why people sabotage relationships they claim to want, why they repeat painful patterns, why they chase pleasure and regret it later, why they say one thing and do another. Freud's message was uncomfortable, but powerful. The human mind is not transparent. It hides things, it protects itself, it deceives itself, and unless you are willing to look deeper, you will mistake unconscious forces for free choice. In this video, we break down 7 Freud ideas that explain human behavior, and why so much of what you do may come from places you never think to examine. 1. The unconscious mind controls more than you think. Freud believed that the conscious mind is only a small part of the whole mind. What you are aware of right now, your thoughts, intentions, and decisions, is just the surface. Underneath that surface is the unconscious, a hidden mental world filled with desires, memories, fears, instincts, and unresolved conflict. This is where Freud placed enormous importance, because according to him, people are not mainly driven by what they know. They are driven by what they do not know. You may think you are making a calm, rational decision, but maybe you are really reacting to an old fear, an old wound, a hidden desire, a buried resentment. You may think you dislike someone for a clear reason, but maybe they trigger something in you that has nothing to do with them. You may think your habits are just habits, but maybe they are symptoms. That is what makes Freud's idea so powerful. He forces you to question the story you tell yourself, because maybe your visible behavior is only the final expression of something much deeper. And if that is true, then human beings are far less conscious than they like to believe. That is not just a theory. It explains everyday life. Why someone ruins success right when it arrives. Why someone keeps choosing the wrong partner. Why someone gets irrationally angry over small things. Why someone feels guilty without knowing why. The unconscious mind does not stay hidden quietly. It leaks into behavior, and Freud believed that until you bring those hidden motives into awareness, they will keep shaping your life from behind the curtain. 2. Repressed desires never disappear. One of Freud's most famous ideas is repression. Repression happens when the mind pushes disturbing thoughts, emotions, or desires out of awareness because they are too painful, shameful, or threatening. But Freud did not believe repression solves anything. He believed it only buries the problem. And what is buried does not die. It waits, it hides, then it returns in another form. It may return as anxiety, as irritability, as obsession, as strange compulsions, as emotional numbness, as self-sabotage. This is one of Freud's darkest insights. The mind can hide something from you, but it cannot erase it. And the longer something remains repressed, the more power it may gain in indirect ways. A person may suppress anger for years and then explode over something trivial. A person may bury grief and become emotionally disconnected. A person may repress desire and become restless, ashamed, or internally divided. On the surface, they do not know what is happening, but underneath, the rejected material is still active. That is why repression is so dangerous. It gives the illusion that you are fine. But internally, pressure builds, and because you do not know the real source, you fight the symptom instead of the cause. Freud believed many people live like this, not because they are weak, but because the mind is designed to protect itself from pain. The problem is that protection can become distortion. What you refuse to face may keep returning until it forces your attention.
3. The mind is divided. Id, ego, superego. Freud did not see the mind as one unified thing. He saw it as a battlefield, a place where different forces are constantly pulling in different directions. He described this through 3 parts: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is instinct. It wants pleasure now, relief now, satisfaction now. It is impulsive, emotional, and primitive. It does not care about consequences. It does not care about morality. It wants what it wants. Then there is the superego. This is the inner judge, the moral voice, the part shaped by rules, ideals, guilt, and social expectations. It tells you what you should do, what is acceptable, what is shameful, what is right. And between them stands the ego. The ego tries to manage reality. It tries to balance instinct and morality, desire and control, pleasure and consequences. This is why human beings feel divided. Part of you wants comfort. Part of you wants discipline. Part of you wants pleasure. Part of you wants dignity. Part of you wants to rebel. Part of you wants approval. This tension is not weakness. According to Freud, it is normal. Human behavior often looks inconsistent because the mind itself contains competing forces. You tell yourself you want one thing, but another part of you wants something else. You make a plan, then break it. You know what is right, then choose what feels good. You want freedom, yet fear what freedom demands. That is the mind in conflict. And Freud believed much of psychological suffering comes from this inner struggle. Not because conflict means something is wrong, but because most people are not aware of how much of their behavior is shaped by this internal war. 4. You are driven by hidden desires. Freud believed that desire plays a much bigger role in human life than people admit. Not just obvious desire, not just sexual desire, but all forms of hidden wanting. The desire to be admired, the desire to dominate, the desire to be safe, the desire to be chosen, the desire to be validated, the desire to return to pleasure and escape discomfort. Freud believed that people often dress these desires in respectable language. They say they want success, but maybe they want superiority. They say they want love, but maybe they want rescue. They say they want control, but maybe they fear helplessness. They say they want peace, but maybe they are avoiding risk. This is what makes desire complicated. It often disguises itself. And because it disguises itself, people can live entire lives without fully understanding what is actually driving them. That is why behavior can seem irrational from the outside. A person may work obsessively, not just for achievement, but for approval they never received. A person may pursue power, not because they love power, but because weakness once humiliated them. A person may chase endless pleasure because stillness would force them to feel what they have been avoiding. Freud's point was not that desire is evil. His point was that hidden desire is powerful. When you do not recognize what you truly want, you become easier to control by it. And the more unconscious the desire, the more confusing your behavior becomes. You say one thing, you do another. You create explanations after the fact. Freud would say, look deeper, because beneath your stated reasons, there may be another motive entirely. 5. Childhood shapes your entire life more than you realize. Freud placed enormous emphasis on childhood. He believed early experiences do not just pass, they structure the personality. The way you were loved, the way you were rejected, the way you were controlled, the way you were ignored, the way conflict felt in your home, the way safety or instability shaped your nervous system. All of this leaves traces, and those traces do not remain in the past. They follow you into adulthood. This is why childhood matters so much in Freud's view, because the adult is often built on emotional patterns formed very early. A child who had to earn affection may become an adult addicted to approval. A child raised in criticism may become an adult ruled by guilt. A child who felt unseen may become an adult who overperforms to feel valuable. A child who learned that love is unstable may enter relationships expecting abandonment. The adult may think they are simply reacting to the present. But Freud believed many present reactions are shaped by unfinished emotional history. That does not mean childhood explains everything, but it often explains more than people want to admit, because it is uncomfortable to realize that old experiences still live inside current behavior. It means you are not starting from zero. You are carrying invisible programming. And unless you examine that programming, you may keep repeating patterns that feel familiar, even when they hurt you. This is one of the hardest truths in psychology.
People often recreate what wounded them because familiarity feels safer than the unknown. That is why understanding childhood is not about blaming the past forever. It is about recognizing where your current patterns began. Because once you see the origin, you have a chance to interrupt the repetition. 6. Defense mechanisms protect you, but they also distort reality. Freud believed the mind has ways of protecting itself from emotional pain. These are called defense mechanisms. They help you avoid unbearable truth, anxiety, guilt, fear, or shame. In the short term, they can help you function, but in the long term, they can trap you in illusion. Take denial. You refuse to accept what is obvious because the truth feels too threatening. Take projection. You accuse others of what exists inside you because it is easier than facing it in yourself. Take rationalization. You create noble-sounding reasons for behavior that really came from fear, desire, or weakness. Take displacement. You redirect emotion toward a safer target because the real target feels too dangerous. These mechanisms are common, human, automatic.
But Freud believed they matter because they shape how people see reality. A person may believe they are being objective while acting entirely from defense. A person may think they are honest while protecting a fragile ego. A person may think they are reacting to the world when they are really reacting to an inner wound. That is why self-knowledge is difficult, because the mind does not just hide painful truth, it actively creates distance from it. It tells stories, it builds excuses, it shifts blame, it edits memory, and all of this can happen without conscious intention. In other words, defense mechanisms do not just protect you from pain, they protect you from seeing yourself clearly, and that clarity is exactly what growth requires. 7. Human beings are often in conflict with themselves. Freud saw conflict as central to human life. Not occasional conflict, constant conflict. Conflict between instinct and morality, between desire and guilt, between pleasure and responsibility, between what you want and what you think you should want. This inner tension explains why people feel divided, why they say yes when they mean no, why they chase what harms them, why they crave intimacy but fear vulnerability, why they want change but resist it at the same time. The human mind is not simple. It is layered, contradictory, and often at war with itself. Freud believed many symptoms of suffering come from this unresolved tension. When desire is blocked, frustration grows. When guilt becomes excessive, joy disappears. When instinct is denied completely, life becomes rigid and lifeless. When impulse takes over completely, life becomes chaotic and destructive. So the goal is not perfection, the goal is awareness, to see the forces clearly, to understand what is pulling you, to recognize the conflict instead of pretending it is not there. Because once you understand the battle, you stop being shocked by your contradictions. You stop assuming you are broken simply because you are divided. You begin to see that being human means carrying tension. The question is whether that tension rules you blindly or whether you become conscious enough to navigate it. Closing. Freud's ideas are unsettling for a reason. They attack the comforting illusion that you fully understand yourself. They suggest that your behavior may be driven by desires you never named, conflicts you never resolved, fears you buried, defenses you mistake for truth, childhood patterns you still carry, instincts you try to hide, and unconscious forces shaping choices you call rational. That is why Freud still matters. Not because every detail of his theory must be accepted without question, but because he forced humanity to confront something deeply uncomfortable. You are not fully transparent to yourself, and the parts of you that remain hidden may be shaping your life the most. That truth can feel heavy, but it can also be liberating. Because once you stop assuming you are perfectly rational, you become curious. You start asking better questions. You notice patterns. You stop taking every impulse at face value. You become less controlled by what you have never examined. The goal is not to become obsessed with every hidden motive. The goal is to become less blind, because the more conscious you become, the less power your unseen patterns have over you. So the real question is not whether unconscious forces exist. The real question is,
Are you aware of them, or are they living your life for you?